You want to study your Bible but you don't know where to begin? You've come to the right place. In this video, I want to help you begin to study the Bible for yourself. If you've ever began to study the Bible for yourself, you know that can be a daunting task. I mean, the Bible itself is full of 66 different books. So which one do you pick? I meant by natural to think, oh, I'll start with the book of Genesis. And that's not really a bad place to start. But I think there's a better one. You see, the entire Bible is pointing towards one person. And his name is Jesus. The whole Bible is pointing towards Jesus. And so I think one of the best places to begin is to begin with Jesus. Looking at one of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all tell the story of Jesus as he was here on earth. Of course, there's other places to learn about Jesus. I mean, Paul, writing the New Testament, parts of it, wrote plenty about Jesus. And some of the Old Testament itself contains information about Jesus, like the prophecies and the prophets, or the people who looked like Jesus before he even came, like Abraham and Joseph and David and Moses. To know Jesus is to read the Gospels. Pick one of them and to begin to read. I think the best one for you to begin to read is Mark's Gospel. And I think there's two main reasons. Number one, it's short. And number two, it's easy to understand. The Gospel is short. It's got 16 chapters, and it'll take you probably an hour to maybe 2 hours to read, depending how fast or slow you read. And so you can read it in one sitting without much difficulty. The reason why you should read the Gospel of Mark is because it's the easiest to understand. See, Matthew, Luke, and John all contain allusions to the Old Testament, and with a great deal. Now, Mark still does that with his Gospel. I mean, it opens up with a quotation from the prophet Isaiah. But he typically keeps out the Old Testament for the most part as you're reading it, so you don't have to know too much to understand what he's writing about. And so that way, because it's so easy to understand, there's not much of a barrier to get into understanding the Gospel. So once you have the Gospel of Mark picked out, how do you begin to study it? Do you immediately jump to the commentaries? Do you pick out a concordance? Do you just read it? Well, I think you should just read it and read it through entirely, maybe even a couple of times. Like I said before, this might take you an hour or an hour and a half, depending on how fast you read. But read the thing, and that's going to help you understand the whole of the Gospel. One of the worst things we can do as we're studying the Bible is to get so focused on the nitty-gritty details that we forget what the whole story is about. It's all about Jesus and him coming to save his people. And as you read the Gospel of John, you'll begin to see that. You begin to see Jesus and his compassion for people, for those who are sick, for those who are demon-possessed. And then you'll see him die on the cross. You get to witness that as you're reading the text itself. The thing about reading it through in one sitting is that it's quite possible that the Gospels themselves were meant to be read in a sitting, in a setting in which people could hear the words being read aloud. You see, today, it's pretty easy to find a book, to find the Bible particularly. I mean, it's the best seller of all time. But back then, it really wasn't the case. In order to get a Bible or to get any book, you had to find someone who was a scribe to make you a transcript, and that would take them, days, months, or even years to get that done correctly. And so it's very costly to buy something like that. And not everybody could afford that, or at least most people couldn't. In fact, most places were places of worship. One of the great things about the Gospel of Mark is that it's broken up in little bitty episodes, little moments that Jesus is interacting with someone else. And it's just a quick little snippet of his life, kind of all spliced together, and that kind of what makes up the Gospel of Mark. And what's great about that is that you can look at those stories and think to yourself, why is this here? Why did Mark choose to put this into his Gospel instead of other stories that the others leave out? And why here amidst these other stories, or amidst this part of Jesus' own story, in the beginning or the end, asking these types of questions helps us understand what Mark wants us to know about Jesus. So I hope that you're inspired and you begin to study the Bible for yourself, specifically the Gospel of Mark, reading through that a couple of times by itself. And then you can subscribe to this channel as I begin to put out more videos on how you can better study the Bible for yourself. And I love doing that on my own time, and I can't wait to share more things with you. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what questions do you still have about starting to study the Bible for yourself? I'll see you in the next time.